killed Laura Palmer? The challenge that I'm setting for myself is to solve the murder before the show reveals it. And then Agent Cooper gets shot. He gets shot, and then it cuts to the credits. We don't know. We didn't get the reveal. We don't know who did it. Okay, let's just jump right into the 2-hour season premiere for season 2. But before we get into all the details, let me just say that this show is one of the coolest things I've ever seen. Like, this show is really kicked off. Now, if you remember from last season's finale, Agent Cooper has been shot. And now he's on the floor bleeding out, but luckily, he was wearing a bulletproof vest. But he had the bulletproof vest pulled up just a little bit. Why? Because of a wood tick. How convenient. Maybe the wood tick is in on it. So anyway, while Agent Cooper is going through all the effects of being shot, he starts having this vision of a giant. And the giant man is giving him riddles. He's saying stuff like, the owls are not what they seem. I'm gonna be completely honest, I've watched a whole season of this show so far, and I still have no idea what's going on. We find out that Ben Horn, he's the businessman, he's been up to a lot of shady stuff so far if you don't remember. He is the owner of the casino/Lady of the Night house, One-Eyed Jack's. And we find out that he's the owner of One-Eyed Jack's because he's trying to sleep with his daughter. He doesn't know that it's his daughter. His daughter is just like undercover at One-Eyed Jack's, and he's trying to get with the new girl, but the new girl is his daughter. I don't think Ben Horn is the one who killed Laura Palmer, but I do need something bad to happen to that little freak. Anyway, Agent Cooper and the Sheriff Harry S. Truman, they're really wrapping things up. So let's do a quick little recap to just remember where we are at this point. Leo Johnson has been shot, Jacques was strangled, the mill burned down, Catherine and Josie are missing, Nadine, that's Big Ed's wife with the eye patch, she's in a coma because she overdosed. Now we know who shot Leo. That was Mr. Jennings, the jailbird. And in this episode we find out that Ben Horn paid him to do it. Not very surprising. That dirty dog. And we know who strangled Jacques, that was Leland Palmer. Leland is Laura's dad, who had been going kind of crazy last season after his daughter died. Anyway, he kills Jacques because Jacques was arrested for, being a suspect in Laura's murder. And so he thinks that he is the one who killed his daughter, and so he strangles him in his hospital bed. In this episode, we see that his hair has turned bright white, and that's why I kind of put him on the board. This is pretty drastic of a change to happen to a character, so I think it's probably pretty important. I think his hair turning white is from the shock of killing someone, like he killed Jacques and now his hair. But yeah, that dude's kind of crazy. Like, here's this really interesting moment from this episode. Say mares eat oats and does eat oats and little lambs eat ivy. All right, now let's talk about my arch nemesis, Andy the Crying Cop. He's so silly. He steps on the porch at Leo Johnson's house, which causes a board to fly up and smack him in the face. Oh, Andy. But underneath that plank is a bunch of clues, baby. Boots and cocaine. What a great accident from Andy. Or is it? Meanwhile, Donna, who's Laura's best friend, is acting really weird. It seems like she's trying to be more like Laura. Regardless, she gets a note telling her that she needs to look into the Meals on Wheels program. Now, the Meals on Wheels program is ran by Norma Jennings. Norma owns the diner in town, and I don't think she's as innocent as she seems. I will say that this episode does a really good job of clearing up a lot of the loose ends that were left from season 1. And we eliminate some pretty big suspects for who killed Laura Palmer. For example, we find out that Leo Johnson has an alibi for the night that Teresa Banks was murdered. Now, Teresa was the first victim to receive the letter under their fingernail that the following cases follow that MO. Laura also gets a letter under her fingernail. But yeah, he was in jail when that happened, so it's looking like it wasn't him. And now he's in like a coma because he got shot. We also got a lot of talk about a red Corvette in the last season, and Leo Johnson drove a red Corvette, so we kind of assumed it was him, but we find out that it was not his red Corvette. There is someone else that drives a red Corvette. Red Corvette. Red Corvette. James, who's like this mysterious biker guy, and he was dating, well, not dating Laura when she died, but she was cheating on her boyfriend Bobby with James and half the town. But James is talking to the sheriff, and he tells the sheriff about how Laura used to always talk about a guy who could really light her fire. And she would keep saying a poem over and over. It was really creepy. It's about like playing with fire and playing with Bob. This is Bob. Bob is the other guy that's been popping up in people's visions, kind of like the one-armed man. Do you remember like the spirit world that we got into last season where Agent Cooper is, in the spirit world and having weird dreams? Well, Bob was a part of that, and we didn't really see or hear much from him last season, so I didn't even really put him up on the board, but he already seems to be pretty important this season. Later this episode, he becomes very important. Now, in this scene, they kept talking about fire, and fire has to do with a pretty big clue that we got in season 1 that never got resolved. It was the fact that there was like a little letter that said, "Fire, walk with me," at the scene of Laura's attack. The way that this season is going so far, based on this episode, is I think we're going to dive more into the supernatural stuff in Twin Peaks, like this giant that showed up for Agent Cooper, and Bob and the one-armed man. All right, it's time for me to lock in my guess for this episode of who I think killed Laura Palmer. The night that Laura Palmer died, she visited James. Then she left James and met up with Leo, Jacques, and Renette. The three of them partied, did drugs, all that stuff, and then Laura and Renette were taken by the mystery man, without Leo and Jacques, to the train where he attacked both Laura and Renette, killing Laura and putting Renette into a coma. Laura's dead, Renette is in a coma. Leo Johnson's in a coma, and Jacques is dead. Whoever this mystery man is has done a really good job of making sure that the people who were there that night are not around to be witnesses. Leo's in a coma, but they tried to kill him. And who tried to kill him? Mr. Jennings. But who do we know hired Mr. Jennings? That's right, Ben Horn. And we also know who killed Jacques. That was Leland Palmer. And then the killer took out, Renette and Laura. And we know that Leland wanted to kill Jacques because he thought that Jacques killed his daughter. And I'm assuming that Ben just wanted to kill Leo because of all of the, crimes they've committed together. He probably just wanted to kind of put an end to that trail. Or maybe Ben did have something to do with Laura Palmer's death, and he's been masterminding killing these people to get rid of witnesses. But I don't think so, though. I don't think it's Ben. So has the killer just gotten lucky that the people that were there that night are all either dead or in a coma? Or is he still running things? Is he a puppet master at the top and everything is on purpose? Which leads me to the end of this episode, which, I don't know if you can tell my demeanor for the first part of this video. I'm confused. I was about to do my whole spiel where I throw some accusations at Andy the crying cop. I was going to point out that at the beginning of the episode, he's on the phone when Agent Cooper gets shot, and he's trying to talk to him, and he keeps going, "It's me, Andy. It's me, Andy." And I was going to be like, that's a secret confession. He's saying, "It's me, Andy. I did it." I was going to bring up the thing about Meals on Wheels with Norma Jennings. I was going to do all that. Everything that I did last season, all my wild, some serious, some joke accusations. But then at the end of this episode, Renette wakes up from her coma, and she has some flashbacks to the night that she was attacked and Laura died. And side note, this flashback scene is one of the most terrifying and beautiful things I've ever seen on television. I'm watching it and I'm like, oh my God, this show is amazing. And then we see, blatantly, Bob kill Laura. So I don't know if that's the reveal or if it's not to be taken literally. That doesn't seem right. That doesn't feel right. Like, I don't think this was the big reveal. But if it was the reveal, did I guess it? No. I didn't even have Bob up on the board until this right now. But I'm going to be honest, it doesn't feel like this is the reveal, so I'm going to keep watching, and hopefully Andy ends up as the killer. Stuff's heating up. Renette, now she's the girl that's in the coma. She was attacked at the same time as Laura Palmer, just she didn't die. She's in a coma. She wakes up, but she can't talk. But that's okay, because Agent Cooper shows up, and he's got some little drawings. He's got sketches of Leo Johnson and Bob. And when she sees the sketch of Bob, she freaks out. So now Agent Cooper and Sheriff Truman and everyone is on full alert for Bob. So Bob is the guy from all of the visions, right? And it seems like he's the killer. But when it comes to Twin Peaks, from what I've learned so far, which is not much, this vision world, spirit world stuff could be like subjective. This might not be an objective ruling of who killed Laura Palmer. So I'm gonna keep making guesses and watching these episodes until they say, this is who killed Laura Palmer, which might not ever happen. So we might be here a while. We learned some small information throughout this episode that I think is setting up kind of like the larger storyline for the rest of the season. I mean, there's 22 episodes in this season, so I imagine there's going to be a lot of different subplots going on. We also learn about the mysterious Mr. Smith. This is a guy that Donna is trying to get information from. And she learns about Mr. Smith from this like lady that she's delivering food to on the Meals on Wheels. And that lady does not like creamed corn. And she has a grandson who does magic. We still don't know anything about Josie and Catherine. They're still missing since the mill fire last season. So yeah, that's still going on. We also get some Andy the Crying Cop action this episode. Speaking of which, I drew this. This is my Andy the Crying Cop merch. Yeah, that's for sale if you know, if you want to support me. It's down below if you want to buy one. But yeah, we find out that Andy the Crying Cop can't have children, and yet Lucy, his girlfriend kind of, is pregnant. Damn. We also get a scene where the Horn brothers, those freaks, are having to deal with one of Leland Palmer's mistakes. Dude, homeboy is off his rocker. He's acting like a child, and I can only assume that it's because of all the trauma he's been going through. He lost his daughter, and then he killed Jacques. His hair turned white. I'm sure that's not fun. But he sees the sketch of Bob on the table, and he freaks out. And he says that he knows that guy. When he was a kid at his grandfather's lake house or whatever, that guy lived next door. And so he rushes off to go tell the sheriff about that. Meanwhile, Audrey, that's Ben Horn's daughter, she has, struck up a friendship or romance with Agent Cooper. She's stuck at One-Eyed Jack's, and she calls Agent Cooper for help, but the only problem is Agent Cooper never opened the note that she slid under his door before he got shot. So he has no idea where she is. Oh, while we're talking about Agent Cooper, at the end of this episode, Bobby's dad shows up, and he's like a military man. And he's like, hey, by the way, we've been monitoring space, and we received some messages. So, I guess there's aliens now? The message from outer space is, the owls are not what they seem. Which is, I think, what the giant said last episode. And so maybe the owls are aliens. I really don't know what the f***'s going on. And then also in this episode, it seems like James, Laura's cousin, and Donna are starting a band or something. I don't know. They're all singing in the living room. And then the phone rings, and it's Mr. Smith for Donna. And he's agreeing to meet with her the next day. At the end of this episode, we get a bunch of creepy, terrifying shots of Bob again. And man, that dude is terrifying. It seems like Bob is the killer, but we've only ever seen visions of Bob. I don't think that we have, or anyone in the show has, actually seen him in person, which leads me to believe maybe Bob is fictional. Plus, if he owned a house when Leland was a child, then that means Bob is like really old. So maybe he's like a ghost. I feel like there's gotta be a ghost in this show, right? Like I keep waiting for a ghost. I don't know, maybe Bob isn't even the killer. Maybe this is just a huge red herring. One of those things where like, oh, the audience thinks they're so smart, they keep guessing. Boom, we showed you who did it. Psych, it ain't actually him at all. He ain't even real, son. So if it's not Bob, then who is it? Well, we have this new Mr. Smith character, and we haven't actually met him yet, but he seems pretty important. I mean, Donna's been talking about him for the past 2 episodes now. We also have this like Agent Cooper's crazy ex-partner thing going on, I suppose. And also something that was kind of a major thing last season that I don't think they've ever brought up again is Bobby killed a guy. Who did Bobby kill? I think his arc is pretty much wrapped up for the most part. I mean, he's doing this romance thing. Another thing from season 1, who is Diane? Agent Cooper's always talking to Diane on this recorder, but she never talks back. She never sends a letter back. Who is Diane? Well, here's my theory. What if Agent Cooper has multiple personalities and Diane is one of his personalities? That's why he's always recording everything he does, so that way when he switches, he can listen and be caught up with what's been going on. And what if he has other personalities other than just Agent Cooper and Diane? What if Bob is one of those personalities? Okay, who am I locking in? I don't think it's Andy, although, I'm completely lost here. I don't really know what's going on because it seems pretty straightforward that this Bob guy killed her. I guess we're gonna find out, but for the sake of, the format of this video, I'm gonna lock in the mysterious Mr. Smith. Maybe he killed Laura, and we just hadn't been introduced to this character yet. So that's my pick for Season 2, Episode 2, Mr. Smith. Okay, we're jumping into Episode 3, and I just want to say I feel like I lost my way last episode. I panicked because I don't really know what's going on, and I just threw out a random guess because I'm really confused about this whole Bob situation. But after this episode, I feel a little bit more on track, and I'm calm. And I'm ready to solve the case. So, someone has broken into Ronette's hospital where she was, she'd woken up from the coma. Well, they break into her room, mess with her IV, and then stick a letter under her fingernail. So this is the killer that is doing this. And this time, it was the letter B that was put under the fingernail. So, for those of you keeping up at home, we have the letters R, B, and T placed under different victims' fingernails. And we find out later in this same episode that it seems like that is spelling out the word Robert, which would be the long version of the word Bob, who is apparently the killer. And I say supposedly the killer, or I don't even know if I said supposedly. I meant supposedly the killer because I think I'm starting to figure out what's going on with Bob. Because that's what's really thrown me for a loop. And now that I think I'm getting a grasp on it thanks to this episode, it's starting to make more sense. In this episode, Agent Cooper is talking about how the only people who have actually seen Bob are the victims and then people in visions. And then they've reached out to all of the other government agencies like the CIA, NASA, and no one has ever heard of this guy. So here's my theory. What if Bob is not a person? What if Bob is a demon? Maybe not even a demon, maybe a ghost, and he possesses people. And every time that he's brought up, fire is brought up. And I mean, that seems pretty demon-y to me. Or even more, maybe he's not even a demon. Maybe he's the devil. Maybe we're dealing with the devil. And some of the stuff that happened in this episode that leads me to believe that is, so the one-armed man at one point, he starts like freaking out after he sees the sketch of Bob, and it seems like he's like possessed, and then he has this medicine stuff that he leaves on the bathroom floor. And so I don't know if he's just like a drug addict, but at the end of it, he goes, "I'm coming for you, Bob." It's like he's trying to find Bob. And then in this episode, we get to see where Leland, Laura's father, is telling Agent Cooper and the sheriff that he knew Bob as a child, how he was next door at his grandfather's lake house. And Bob would always ask him, "You want to play with fire, little boy?" And he'd throw matches at Leland, which is, pretty funny. Speaking of Leland, he plays a pretty big part in this episode. He seems to be feeling a ton better. He kind of went crazy after his daughter died, understandably, but in this episode we see him comforting his niece, Laura's cousin, and he just really seems back to normal, and it's very sweet. It's a very sweet moment. Until Sheriff and Agent Cooper show up to arrest him for the murder of Jacques, which we saw that happen. We knew that was the truth, but I mean, can you blame him? I mean, he thought Jacques killed his daughter. We get a whole bunch of subplot stuff this episode, and I don't really think it has anything to do with Laura's death. Like, there's some romance stuff with James and Laura's cousin, which of course upsets James's girlfriend Donna, which I guess they're dating now. I don't know if Donna ever broke up with Mike. Y'all remember Mike? We haven't seen Mike in years. We also find out that Lucy, the receptionist's baby daddy, is like this dude named Dick that works at Horn's department store. I don't know what that has to do with anything, but you gotta feel bad for your boy Andy the crying cop. But yeah, there's a bunch of like subplots going on that I just don't think have anything to do with Laura's death, so I'm not gonna dive super into them. And like that goes for Audrey being held at One-Eyed Jack's, the whole storyline where Big Ed's wife, Nadine, who overdosed and was in a coma, she wakes up and now she is both the Incredible Hulk, she's super strong, and she thinks she's 18 again. So fun stuff happening. Fun stuff. I really do love this show. And I hope by glossing over some of the cooler subplots, I'm not insulting any fans of the show. I love it. I love all of it. However, this video would be 8 hours long if I went into every single detail for all 22 episodes of season 2. So back to Laura stuff. Last episode, I locked in Mr. Smith, and in this episode, we meet Mr. Smith. This is him over here. I thought he was going to be a really old man, but nope, he's a young man who just doesn't leave his house. I think we can all relate. It seems like Mr. Smith was really close to Laura, and he's giving Donna a lot of information about her, like even little things like little sayings that Laura would say to Donna that I don't know why he would know. And Laura always kept him a secret, which is strange. And at the end of this episode, Donna finds Laura's diary in Mr. Smith's house. I guess this is different from the other diary that we have of Laura's. I do think Mr. Smith is going to play a pretty big role in this stuff this season, but I don't think he killed Laura. I think I was way too hasty when I said that. Because right now, I'm in full-on Bob is the devil camp. I'm team Bob is the devil boy. And so now we're looking for who Bob possessed. And I've lost myself in this journey. I need to go back to my roots. I need to go back to the characters we met in the first episode. Because if I know anything about mysteries, and I know a lot about mysteries, the person who did it needs to be introduced as early as possible. So I'm gonna bring back the idea of maybe it's Agent Cooper. We know that one of Bob's victims did not take place in Twin Peaks. Agent Cooper is not from Twin Peaks. Cooper has a lot of visions and dreams that go into this spirit world, and he's had visions of Bob before. I mentioned an idea earlier about Agent Cooper having multiple personalities, but maybe he doesn't have multiple personalities. Maybe he just gets possessed. And I think this is gonna get me clowned, but I'm gonna stand my ground. Agent Cooper is my locked-in pick for season 2, episode 3. Episode 4 begins with Leland Palmer being interrogated about his crime of killing Jacques. And Leland admits to killing Jacques. And while everyone seems to understand that the grief he was going through caused him to act irrationally, he's still going to be on the hook for this. Just a heads up for this episode, not a whole lot happens when it comes to the killing of Laura Palmer. You can tell that they're setting up a ton of stuff early on in the season to help get us through all 22 episodes. And so I'm trying to figure out what pertains to Laura Palmer and what doesn't, and I think I'm doing a pretty okay job so far. Something that I think definitely involves Laura Palmer is all of this business with the mysterious Mr. Smith and Donna. Mr. Smith has Laura's diary, and Donna keeps trying to get it so that she can find out what happened to Laura. When it comes to the character of Mr. Smith, there's something oddly comforting about him, but also really creepy. I don't think he killed her, but he is an odd guy. This episode also gives us quite an alarming amount of clues towards my favorite suspect and my arch enemy, Andy the Crying Cop. Now look, I know Andy didn't do it, okay? I get that. I need to give up on this dream. And it's probably likely that his whole story arc just kind of ends with him actually being the father of Lucy's baby and like them living happily ever after, right? But in this episode, Andy has a Flesh World magazine. That is the catalog that has been pretty closely tied into all of the clues surrounding Laura Palmer. And he just so happens to be wearing the same boots that they found at Leo Johnson's house. Not the same pair of boots, just the same kind of boots. Look, it would be really wild at this point if it was revealed to be Andy, but it wouldn't be out of left field. All of the evidence that I brought up, some jokingly last video I did, a lot seriously, it kind of creates the perfect little platform to where if Andy was the killer, you couldn't say that it came out of nowhere and you couldn't be mad at the show. They drop a lot of seeds insinuating Andy could be the killer. This episode ends with Agent Cooper and Sheriff Truman meeting up at the bar, and it looks like they're gonna go save Audrey from One-Eyed Jacks. And we know that the whole point of this exchange is to try to kill Agent Cooper because Jacques, the guy that we've been talking about that Leland Palmer killed, his older brother, Jean, he wants to kill Agent Cooper. And look, I know that last episode I locked in Agent Cooper as the killer, and once again, I'm going to retract that and say I'm still floundering out here. This show has transformed into something I have no experience with. At this point, I think we're just going to have to keep watching the show and hope that we can pick up on some clues, but as for this part of the video, who I'm going to lock in for this episode of Who Killed Laura Palmer, I'm gonna pick Andy the crying cop. I know, I just said that we've moved on from that theory. But there's some new little bits of evidence against him, and I think I just really want the reveal to be Andy. I just feel like it would be a super cool reveal. I mean, what can I say? This show is like a bucking bronco, and I was thrown off of this horse a long time ago. And so I'm just using my lasso to try to snag anything I can get a hold of. In this episode, I got me a hold of Andy. As these episodes go on, I feel like more and more of the plots are becoming about something other than the main mystery of who killed Laura Palmer, which I think means that the show is growing past the mystery and, becoming something that can stand on its own without needing, hey, who killed Laura Palmer to be the main central theme of the show. I'm wearing this prison inmate shirt because I'm killing the YouTube game right now. No, I'm joking. Please don't bully me. I'm wearing this because in this episode, some trial hearings take place, and it takes place in a bar, which is cool. It has the judge and some townspeople. We also find out that Andy is able to have children. Shout out my boy Andy the crying cop. I'm sorry for all the times I accused you of being her killer, but I do think that my guess about him and Lucy ending up happily ever after is going to be correct. That's going to be a fun little end for them. This episode also sees 2 stealth operations take place. Agent Cooper and Sheriff Truman are trying to save Aubrey from a place named One-Eyed Jack's. That is the casino and Lady of the Night place. I mean, if you've made it this far into this video and watched last part, you know what's going on. I'm trying to do less hand-holding this time. And Donna and Laura's cousin Maddie are on an operation to try to get Laura's secret diary from Mr. Smith. We only met Mr. Smith this season, but I think he's a really important character. He's so interesting. But maybe he's a ghost or something. I want there to be a ghost, and he gives off ghost vibes. He talks like a ghost. I know that's a weird thing to say, but he does. And then he steps outside for a minute and the sunlight hits him and he passes out. Could be a vampire. In this episode, he kisses Donna, which leads me to believe that he was probably also romantically entangled with Laura Palmer. Anyway, at the end of this episode, he catches Donna and Maddie trying to steal the diary, and he's like, you want to know a secret? How about the greatest secret? The secret that Laura knew, the secret of who killed you. And then he scratches his face with a rake. I have no idea what that means.
I trusted you.
I assume it was him threatening them, but it was oddly poetic to be a murder threat, The other rescue mission going on goes a little bit better. Cooper and Truman are able to get Audrey out of One-Eyed Jack's. It just occurred to me that I wanted to call her Aubrey. Have I been calling her Aubrey accidentally? I'm sure I'll get some comments about it. But they are able to save Audrey thanks to some help from Officer Hawk. Bookhouse boys, baby. So where does this leave us with Laura's case? I'm gonna be honest, I don't think we learned anything in this episode that points us in the direction of anyone on the wall or in the town, which has kind of been the case for this whole season so far. I'm really trying my best. I mean, we know it was Bob to a certain extent, I guess. I take that back. We don't know that. So who do I lock in for this episode? I think once we get into the diary of Laura's that Mr. Smith has, we will have a pretty clear step forward for some solid suspects. But until then, I don't think any of my suspects that I have claimed in this video or the last video hold any water. I don't think it's Sheriff Truman. I don't think it's Norma. I don't think it's Andy the crying cop. I think maybe Agent Cooper is still on the table, but I really doubt it. I don't think it's Bobby. I don't think it's James. I don't know. Is it bad if I just lock in Bob? Because this season, as the episodes go on, I feel like we're straying farther and farther from a murder mystery. What if it's not even really much of a whodunit this season? What if it's like, hey, yeah, we told you it was Bob. Let's move on. So I guess that's who I'm locking in this episode is Bob. The guy who we saw did it. Buckle up, boys and girls, because this episode is called Demons, which when I saw, I got really excited because I think it means I'm right. Maybe not about who killed Laura, but that maybe Bob is a demon and he possessed someone to kill Laura. And, I think I nailed it. At the end of this episode, Agent Cooper and Sheriff Truman are questioning the one-armed man. And he was taking some kind of drug or something like that. But they kept the drug away from him, which was causing him to freak out. And he transformed. He called himself an inhabiting spirit. And he says something about how Bob used to be his familiar. He says a whole bunch of cryptic stuff. But from what I understand, Bob is a demon who requires a human host. And he's been living in a human host in Twin Peaks for 40 years. And the police sketch of Bob and the Bob that we see in the visions in the show so far is Bob's true face. And supposedly the only people that have seen his true face are the gifted that see him in visions and his victims. So if the host has been living in Twin Peaks for 40 years, I'm assuming it is an older person. Which points us to 3 main suspects. The most obvious being Benjamin Horn. The one-armed man says that Bob feeds off of fear and does it with a smile. And that really lines up with old businessman Ben, the Ben Horn dog himself. He terrorizes everyone, he mistreats everyone, and he smiles and laughs and eats sandwiches like nothing's wrong. He has done truly the most despicable things consistently in this show from the first episode all the way to now. It would make sense that he's been possessed by a demon. The next suspect is someone that I've had in the back of my head as kind of a least suspectable person ever pick. Like in an Agatha Christie, pick the person who's the least likely to do it and it could be them type of way. And that's someone that we meet immediately in the pilot episode of this show. The guy who finds Laura Palmer's body, Catherine's husband. He's always smiling, he's a very nice guy, and he's been around for the whole show. He's just never really anything important. I didn't even really include him on the wall because I just thought that he was kind of tied up in the whole like mill subplot, and he wasn't even a major part of that. So it would be a pretty crazy twist if it was him. And our third suspect is Leland Palmer. I'm gonna be honest, the only thing that really kind of implicates Leland is the fact that he was talking about how he saw Bob when he was a kid, like him being his neighbor. And from what we've learned in this episode is the only people that are able to see Bob's true face are his victims and the people that can see him in visions. And considering he like threw matches at him and like said, "You want to play with fire, little boy?" It seems like he's more of a victim than a gifted one who saw him in visions. But he's alive and well, so I don't know if he's much of a victim then. I don't know. That's the only part that doesn't really add up. Or maybe Leland is a victim, and you want to know who kind of manipulates and takes advantage of Leland in this show? His boss, Ben Horn. Now, I would have never in a million years have locked in Ben Horn. I mean, from the very first episode, I've been saying he's obviously a huge red herring, but it's starting to look like maybe he is the killer. I mean, right now, as we're being presented with these options, it's kind of brilliant, right? We've already written him off as too obvious of a suspect to actually be the killer. We watch him do despicable things constantly throughout this show. So we assume it's not him. But maybe that's the brilliant thing, right? The big reveal isn't that someone shocking is the killer. It's very obviously who the killer is. It's just why he's a killer. And the why is because he's being possessed by a demon. So that's my locked in pick for episode 6, Ben Horn. I feel like I'm really on to something here. I'm super pumped. Okay. Full transparency, I've been making these segments like super short, like 5 minutes or less, because I thought I was going to have to fit in like 22 episodes into this video before we got the reveal. But we got the reveal. This is the reveal. In episode 7, I'm still kind of processing what happened. So the episode starts, and I pretty quickly realized that either I nailed it with my Ben Horn guess, or I've fallen for the biggest red herring yet right here at the end. So the one-armed man is like looking for Bob with Agent Cooper and the sheriff and stuff. And when Ben Horn walks in, he freaks out. And I'm like, oh snap, dude, I got it. And then we find some of the diary pages where Laura's talking about how Bob had been abusing her since she was a kid. And then she also includes the fact that one day she'll tell the world about Ben Horn. And I'm like, oh snap, buzzer beater. I accused Ben Horn the episode before the reveal. And then you follow that up with the scene where Audrey asks her dad, hey, were you sleeping with Laura Palmer? And he says, yes. And then she goes, did you kill him? And he doesn't answer. He just says, I loved her. Next thing you know, Agent Cooper and Sheriff Truman have him under arrest. You can tell, like, I'm so excited. I'm not even doing like an excited like YouTube voice. But then, so yeah, I'm super excited because I think I nailed it. And I'm like, oh, this makes sense. He's been terrible the whole time. He's been possessed by a demon, of course. And then the whole episode's mood changes and we see who Bob really is. Leland Palmer, Laura's dad. So I brought him up in the last part as talking about like kind of the three main suspects because they said, you know, they'd been living in Twin Peaks for 40 years. And so I immediately kind of picked the older guys. So after all of this, my first video where I covered the entirety of season 1 of Twin Peaks, this video where I've done the first 7 episodes of season 2 of Twin Peaks has led to this moment where we finally got the reveal of who killed Laura Palmer. Let's answer the question. Did I solve Twin Peaks before the reveal? Not even close. Not even. The closest I came to guessing Leland Palmer was last episode, the episode before the reveal. So I guess the big question then after the main question, which is, did I solve it? No. Can it be solved? Is it even possible to guess who did it based on just what the show gives you? And I think it's a yes. I think that you can totally come to the conclusion that it's Leland Palmer. I don't think that it's totally out there. I don't think that it's hidden. I think they give you the clues very stealthily throughout 2 seasons to make that guess. We see him going crazy. We see him kill Jacques. We get the information about him seeing Bob as a kid. That is a huge clue, and one that I picked up on, but I just didn't pull the trigger on because I don't know. I just didn't think. I mean, we literally in season 1 see Laura's mom see Bob at the foot of Laura's bed in their home. Laura's cousin starts to see visions of Bob after being around Leland for a little bit. The only person that we don't see having these visions is Leland, but everyone in his home does. Now, to be fair, you don't know what Bob is or who Bob is at that point, so it's pretty difficult to be like, oh, he was possessed? Which I don't even actually know if that's the case. I've stopped at this episode. I have not watched episode 8, 9, 10. All I know is I saw Leland be Bob. I just want to say that this has been a really fun adventure, and I've had a blast watching this show. I can't wait to keep watching this show, and I'm very thankful for all of you who joined me on this journey of watching the show. I've really fallen in love with Twin Peaks, and I can't wait to watch the rest, and the movie, and the return season. Oh, and last thing, if you do want to buy an Andy the Crying Cop shirt, yeah, they're available down below. Thanks for watching!